The kettle was still warm when Tamaz Vey understood he was alone on the station. He had walked into the galley at 6:12 hours station time, the way he had walked into it for 11 years, expecting the burnt bread smell of Hruthick's awful cardamom tea, and the iron tang of the recycler venting, and the soft clatter of 40-odd people pretending they had slept well. Instead, there was the kettle's small, steady whisper, and the sigh of the air handlers, and somewhere down the corridor, a maintenance drone trying to finish the third bar of its patrol song over and over because the next bar required a human override that nobody had given it. He stood in the doorway and listened. The shift bell had not rung. The shift bell always rang. He could count on the shift bell the way other men in other lives counted on the sun. "Adisa," he said into his collar mic. "Adisa, are you on station?" The mic answered with the quiet hush of an open channel that had no one in it. He set his hand on the counter beside the kettle and felt the warmth seep into his palm. Someone had touched this thing in the last 10 minutes. Someone had stood here and reached up and pulled down the white ceramic mug now sitting empty in the sink, mouth gummed with cooling residue. Someone had been alive in this room until very recently, and then they had not been, and the kettle had not yet had time to forget them. He moved slowly through the galley. A half-eaten bowl of porridge sat on the long table, the spoon still in it, the surface of the porridge skinned where the air had begun its small chemistry. Beside the bowl lay a reading slate paused on a news feed, a Vorund minister with too many teeth caught mid-syllable. Hruthick's brown leather jacket hung on the back of his usual chair, the worn elbow patch facing the door the way he had worn it for 11 years. Tamaz touched the elbow patch. It was still warm, too. He felt the warmth go up his arm and into his throat, and he had to set his other hand on the table to steady himself. There is a particular kind of quiet that a station learns to carry, a quiet built out of small, ordinary sounds, the hiss of pneumatic doors, the chime of an open comms band, the distant cough of the man on third shift who had smoked for 40 years and would not be told. That kind of quiet is alive. It hums. What had taken its place was a quiet that did not hum. It sat on the room like a hand on the back of a neck. He walked out of the galley. The corridor lights were on their standard cycle, warm amber, the floor strip pulsing in its slow blue migration toward the bridge. The maintenance drone passed him in its loop and beeped a small confused beep and asked him, in its small confused voice, whether he would like to authorize a transition to the next patrol verse. And he said yes, because there was nothing else to say to it, and the drone burbled and ratcheted on around the bend. He passed the crew quarters. The doors were not locked. He pushed the first one open and saw Talia's bed with the blanket flung back the way she always flung it, the imprint of her body still visible in the foam, the corner of a paperback novel sticking out from under the pillow. He pushed the next door. Marcus's berth, his nightlight on its smallest setting, his goldfish drifting indifferently in its small lit tank. The fish was alive. The man was not in the room. He had checked 5 rooms before he understood that he was going to check all of them, that there was a clean wide hole inside him, that the checking was going to take the rest of the morning to fill in. "Adisa," he said again into the mic, and his voice had a crack in it now. "Adisa, please." The hush. He found her on the agricultural deck. She was standing in the long green tunnel of the soybean rows with her arms folded across her chest, her dark short braids pushed back behind one ear, the freckles on her brown cheek catching the grow light. She had a wrench in one hand. She had been on her way to fix the eastern hydroponic pump when whatever had happened. She turned at the sound of his boots and her face changed. "Oh, thank God," she said. "Oh, thank God, Tamaz, I thought I was losing my mind. The whole bloody station." "I know. Where is everyone?" "I don't know. Where is everyone, Tamaz? I called Hruthick and his bunk is." "I know, I checked his. Mariama is. I checked hers, they're all like that." She put the wrench down on a pipe with the kind of care a person uses when they don't trust their hands. She kept the hand on the wrench. Her shoulders were trying very hard not to do anything that her shoulders would later be embarrassed about. "It's a drill," she said. "It's not a drill." "It's a drill, they didn't tell us. Some new emergency protocol." Adisa, Hruthik's jacket is still on the back of his chair. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they had set into the look she used when she was about to be useful instead of afraid, which was the look Tamaz loved her for more than he had ever told her. "Right," she said, "bridge now." They went to the bridge. The bridge of Outpost Thurian 9 was a small, unromantic room shaped roughly like a wide soup ladle, with the main viewports along the curved wall and a sad collection of consoles squatting under them like patient dogs. The lights had been left on standard. The captain's chair was empty. The night shift duty board still showed the last entries from Mariama's neat handwriting, an inventory complaint, and a request for a maintenance window on the secondary scrubber, and a small unprofessional doodle of a sleeping cat. Adisa went straight to comms. Tamaz went straight to the sensor board. "Long range is dead," Adisa said. "Sensors say there's nothing within 20 light minutes." "Long range isn't dead. It's responding, but there's no one out there to respond." "Aldrich Beacon. Silent. Hardy Station. Silent. Earth Relay." She looked at him. "Earth Relay 2. He sat down very slowly on the edge of the navigation console. He had been born on Earth. He had not been back to Earth in 17 years. He had grown up in a tin-roofed house in Lagos with a mother who had taught him 3 languages and a song about a tortoise who outwitted a leopard, and he had left Earth and become a wrench jockey on a series of way stations, because the song about the tortoise had stopped being a song about a tortoise and had started being a song about him, about the way he meant to live, slow and stubborn and small. He had not been back. He had also not, in all those 17 years, lost the small, constant background sense that Earth was there, that if everything else ever went wrong, that blue stubborn rock would still be turning in its appointed place. He had not known he carried that sense until the moment Adisa said the Earth Relay was silent, and he felt something go missing inside his ribs. "It can't be everyone," he said. "It can't be everyone. There has to be someone. There has to be someone." They said it back and forth a few more times, because saying it felt like making it true. The maintenance drone passed the bridge door and beeped at them and waited politely for an override. "Go," Adisa said to it, "go finish your song." It went and finished its song. They spent the next 2 hours walking the station from the airlock ring to the reactor crawlspace, calling names. The names ran out and they kept calling. They called the Vorund cargo agent who had been on station 3 days for a manifest dispute. They called the Keth bonded courier who had been sleeping in the visitor pod with her translation rig on her chest. They called the 2 children of the bonded courier, whose names neither of them could pronounce properly but had been trying, for the courier's sake, all week. They called Mariama. They called Hruthik. They went on calling Hruthik long after they should have stopped, because Hruthik was the kind of man you could not stop calling for, the kind of man whose absence in a room was an active thing pulling at you, and they were both very tired. The thing that began to undo them as they walked was the small, ordinary evidences. A toothbrush on the edge of a sink, still wet. A book held open against the arm of a chair by a paperweight, the paperweight a small smooth stone that Mariama had carried with her from a beach on a world neither of them had ever asked her about. A shower running in the 3rd deck washroom, water gone cold, the small bar of green soap still spinning slow circles in the drain. A drafting screen on the engineering deck with a half-finished schematic on it, the cursor still patiently blinking. A child's plush toy, one of the bonded courier's children's, a small green stuffed grub with 1 button eye sitting in the corridor outside the visitor pod, abandoned mid-stride, as though its owner had dropped it and then dissolved. Tamaz picked up the grub. He did not know what to do with the grub. He carried it for a while. He set it down, eventually, on the front desk of the visitor pod where the courier would see it when she came back, if she came back, and the act of setting it down required more from him than he had expected. Adisa, on the agricultural deck on their second pass, found a glove she did not recognize lying in the kelp pad. She picked it up. It was small. It was wet at the fingertips. She did not say anything about it. She did not put it down either. She carried it the rest of the morning. They did not speak much during the walking. There was nothing to say. They had said it all already, and the saying had not made it less true, and so they walked in the kind of silence two people fall into when they have learned, the hard way, that they are not going to be saved by talking. Their boots on the deck plates made the only honest sound on the station. The maintenance drone passed them twice. The second time, it beeped at them and asked again about its patrol song, and Adisa, very gently, told it to stop singing for a while, and the drone considered this for a full second and then went off to a corner of the corridor and waited politely in case it was needed. They sat down in the galley at last, because there was nowhere else to sit down. Adisa put her elbows on the table beside the half-eaten porridge and pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. "Talk to me," she said. "Theories, anything." "Mass evacuation we slept through. They wouldn't leave us. They would if they couldn't find us. You're in the corridor next to Ops. They could find you. Then it wasn't an evacuation." "Right. Some kind of phase event. Reality bubble. Selective stasis." "Stasis of what? Of everyone. Of 100,000 stations. Of Earth. Of everything except us." "Why us?" He looked at her. She looked at him. 11 years of looking at each other across consoles and toolboxes and crowded shift meals went between them. "Adisa," he said carefully, "why would aliens leave behind 2 grease-stained outpost techs and nothing else? That's not flattering. It's not meant to be." "I don't know." "Neither do I." She lowered her hands. Her eyes were red. "If you say anything about Adam and Eve," she said, "I will break your nose." "I wasn't going to." "You were thinking it." "I was thinking it. I wasn't going to say it." "Good." A small noise came up from the agricultural deck. They both heard it. They both went very still. It was a small noise, the way a stone dropped in a pond is a small noise. It rippled out into the silence, and the silence parted around it. "Tamaz," Adisa said. "Yeah." "That was a footstep." "Yeah." "That was a small footstep." "Yeah." They went down to the agricultural deck. They went quietly, which neither of them was good at, and they went unarmed, because Thurian 9 was a maintenance way station and not a warship, and there was nothing on board to be armed with except wrenches and Hruthik's ceremonial knife, which Hruthik had taken to wearing on his belt the last 6 months out of an obscure homesickness, and which was now presumably wherever Hruthik was. Tamaz carried a length of inch-and-a-quarter pipe out of the toolbox in the corridor, because carrying it made his hands feel less stupid. Adisa carried a flashlight she did not turn on. They went down through the row of soybeans and into the row of tomatoes, which always smelled of summer afternoons in some country neither of them had ever been to, and they went past the row of beans and into the small wet pad where the kelp grew. And there, at the back of the wet pad, between the kelp rack and the wall, was a small wet trembling creature with its arms wrapped around its knees. Tamaz stopped. Adisa stopped. The creature looked up at them, and the throat patches under its small fluted jaw flared once, dim, and then dimmed further as it tried to make itself smaller. He had seen Silene before. He had seen them on news feeds mostly, and once at a long distance through a viewport during a diplomatic flyby. He knew the shape of them, small, bipedal, narrow-shouldered, large dark eyes set wide in a face that was nearly but not quite a child's face by human reckoning. He knew the throat patches. He knew that the throat patches were how they spoke when they did not feel like using their mouths. Bright meant calm. Dim meant frightened. Black meant something he had never heard a name for, and hoped he never would. The patches under this Silene's jaw were almost black. He set the pipe down on the floor. He set it down slowly so it would not clang. "Hey," he said. "Hey now, hey, it's all right." The Silene did not move. Addisa knelt at the entrance to the wet pad and put the flashlight down and put both her hands palm up on her thighs, the way she did with the small, fearful station cats whenever a new one came aboard. "My name is Addisa," she said softly. "My friend's name is Tamaz. We're not going to hurt you." The Silene's mouth opened. A sound came out that was not quite a word in any language Tamaz had ever heard. The throat patches flickered once, less black. "You speak any human," he said. The Silene blinked. Slowly, slowly, one small fluted hand uncurled from around the knees and made a gesture. 2 fingers tapped twice against the chest. Tamaz did not know what it meant. Addisa, who had grown up the daughter of a xenoethnographer in 3 different embassies before she had decided she would rather fix pumps for a living, did. "That's a yes," she murmured. 2 taps means yes. 1 tap means no. Silene creche sign. It's what they teach the very small ones before they're old enough for full speech. "How small are we talking?" "Small." Addisa tapped 2 fingers twice against her own chest. The Silene's throat patches lifted half a shade out of their darkness. "We are not going to hurt you," Addisa said again. "Do you understand?" 2 taps. "Do you know what happened to everyone?" A pause, 1 tap. "Are you alone?" 2 taps. Then after a moment the Silene corrected itself. 1 tap, then a small gesture toward Tamaz and Addisa, then 2 taps. "Not alone now." Addisa's mouth did something small and brave. "What's your name?" she said. The Silene worked the small fluted mouth around the shape of a sound, and managed it on the second try. "EU," it said. "EU," Addisa repeated. "Hello, EU, I'm going to come a little closer. Is that all right?" 2 taps. She crawled forward across the wet pad on her knees, slow as a tide. Tamaz stayed where he was with his hands at his sides, because he had been told once by a more sentimental man than himself that a frightened child counts the hands of the adults in a room and trusts the ones whose hands she can always see. Addisa got within arm's reach of EU and stopped. She did not reach. She waited. EU reached. A small fluted hand came out from between the knees and rested very carefully on the back of Addisa's wrist. The throat patches lifted another shade. The Silene's whole body relaxed by what looked, to Tamaz, like a millimeter, and a millimeter was a great deal. They sat that way for a while. "EU," Addisa said at last, "how did you get to this station?" The small mouth tried words. The words were broken. The words came out in pieces. EU had been with her caretaker. Her caretaker had been ill. Her caretaker had put her on a ship to be looked after by an aunt. The ship had stopped here for repairs. The repairs had been 3 days. On the 3rd night EU had woken up, and there had been no one in the cabin, and no one in the corridor, and no one anywhere. And she had been afraid. And she had remembered the smell of the green deck from when the maintenance man with the big mustache had taken her there to show her the tomatoes. And she had come here because the tomatoes had smelled like the place her caretaker grew up. "Ruthik," Tamaz said quietly. "He showed her the tomatoes," Addisa said. "He would have." They were both quiet for a moment, thinking about Ruthik, who had grown up in a hill country on a world neither of them had ever been to, and who had, 3 days ago, taken a Silene child to see the tomato vines because the tomato vines smelled. He had said, of his mother's kitchen. "EU," Tamaz said. "We're going to take care of you until we can find your aunt, or your caretaker, all right." 2 taps. Then, after a moment of looking carefully at his face, a small further gesture. The 2 fingers tapped against the chest, then opened outward and laid themselves flat against the sternum. "That means thank you," Adisa said, "more or less." "More or less is good enough," Tamaz said. They took her out of the wet pad and up to the galley, because the galley was the warmest place on the station, and Tamaz could not stand the idea of a frightened child in a place that smelled of kelp. He boiled water in the kettle that had once been warm because some other person had boiled water for the porridge in the bowl, and he made a thin sweet tea the way Hruthick had taught him in case it might be the sort of thing a small Silene could drink, and he set it on the table in front of her. And after a long, careful examination, she took the cup in both small, fluted hands and tasted it, and her throat patches lifted 3 shades all at once. "There we go," Adisa said. "There we go," Tamaz said. They drank tea with a small alien child on an empty station for the better part of an hour. EU did not say much. She did not have many human words, and she had used most of them telling the story of the tomatoes, but she watched. She watched the way Adisa held her cup with both hands. She watched the way Tamaz stirred his with the spoon Hruthick had whittled from a broken chopstick. She watched the small drone come past the galley door and beep its query and go on around the corner. After a while she got up from the table and went, slowly, careful of her bare feet on the deck plates, and stood in front of the small drone the next time it came around, and put her hand out, and let it scan her the way it had been built to scan visitors who were not in the manifest. The drone considered her. It found in its small, confused way that she was not in the manifest. It chimed politely. It asked in standard if she would like to be added to the visitor log. EU tapped twice against her chest. The drone, which did not understand Silene Kresh sign but did understand affirmation when it heard it, added her to the log under the name she gave it, which she pronounced very carefully for it, and which the drone, just as carefully, spelled wrong. The drone then thanked her, in the small chirruping way it thanked everyone, and went off to finish its patrol. EU came back to the table. She climbed up onto Hruthick's chair, where his jacket still hung, and she sat down in front of his half-eaten porridge. She looked at the porridge for a long moment. Then she looked at Tamaz. "His," she said. "His," Tamaz said. "He gave you the tomatoes," Adisa said. 2 taps. "Did he tell you about his mother?" A long, careful pause, then 2 slow taps. Then EU lifted both hands and made a small gesture in the air, palms cupped, fingers spread, that Adisa watched with a thoughtful expression. "What is that?" Tamaz said. "She is showing us his mother's kitchen," Adisa said softly. "Silene have a memory sign. When someone tells you a story about a place, you can carry the place. You hold it like that in the palms so the place doesn't fall." EU held the place. She held it for some seconds. Then she set her hands down on the table, palms down, and pressed gently, and the place she had been holding settled presumably into the table, where the table would keep it for her. Tamaz had to look away for a moment. When he looked back, EU was carefully, slowly, with the gravity of someone performing a small, important rite, eating Hruthick's cold porridge. She did not like it. He could see in the small, fluted face that she did not like it. She ate it anyway. She ate it because Hruthick had taken her to see the tomatoes, and his porridge was getting wasted, and she was a small Silene of good breeding who had been raised, somewhere along her short, complicated life, by people who had taught her that you did not waste a man's porridge after he had taken you to see his tomatoes. Adisa caught Tamaz's eye. Adisa did not say anything. Adisa did not have to say anything. Tamaz drank his tea and pretended his eyes were stinging because the tea was hot. It was while they were drinking that the comm panel above the galley door, which had been dead all morning and which they had stopped looking at, woke up. It did not chime. It hissed once, and then a voice came out of it that was not a voice. That was a chord made of 3 voices stacked at slightly wrong intervals. That made the bones behind Tamaz's ears ache. "Present the air," it said. EU went small. Tamaz saw it happen. The shoulders curled in, The throat patches snapped to black. The small hands closed around the teacup until the cup creaked. "Present the heir," the cord said again. "We have come for what is ours." Addisa stood up. "Who is this?" she said evenly. The cord answered. It did not understand the question, but it answered the question it preferred. "We are Kheth of the second claw. We have tracked the airlight to this rust. Present her. The bargain of the neutral zone has been invoked. No harm shall come to the guardians who comply." "The neutral zone," Addisa said. "They moved everyone," Tamaz said slowly. "They moved everyone out of here. Phase shifted them. They didn't kill anybody, they cleared the space, so they could come in without witnesses. And we got missed. And we got missed." He looked at Iyu. Iyu had not moved. The throat patches were the blackest he had seen them. "You're not theirs," he said to her quietly. She tapped once against her chest. "You don't want to go with them." One tap. "Do you know who they are?" She looked up at him. Her eyes were large and dark and very tired, and there was, in them, the particular ancient knowing that children sometimes have when they have been told too much too early. She tapped twice. "Iyu," Addisa said. "Iyu, are you the heir of something?" A long silence. 2 taps. Tamaz sat down. He sat down because his knees were tired of holding him. He had heard in his life 2 or 3 rumors about the Silene royal line. He had heard that they had been kings once. He had heard that the line had been brought low in a civil war a generation before he was born. He had heard that the last surviving heir had been smuggled out as an infant and hidden on a backwater colony and lost track of. He had heard that the Keth wanted that heir because possessing her would give them a legal claim to the trade arteries that ran through Silene space. He had heard that the Vorund wanted her because possessing her would deny the Keth that same claim. He had heard, and he had not believed, because the kind of man who hears that sort of rumor in a galley over the 3rd drink does not believe much of what he hears in a galley over the 3rd drink. The kettle was still warm. "Present the heir," said the cord through the comm. "Tamaz," Addisa said. "Yeah. We are not presenting her." "No," he said, "we are not." Iyu's hand crept across the table and laid itself on the back of his wrist, the way it had laid itself on Addisa's in the wet pad. He did not move his wrist. He felt his pulse against the small fluted fingers and the small fluted fingers against his pulse, and he thought, very clearly, the way a man thinks when something has finally simplified itself. "I am going to die before I let them have her." He had not known he had that thought in him. He found that he had it. He found that he had it the way a man finds a coin in an old coat. "How long until they come aboard?" Addisa said. "They're not asking permission," he said. "They're being polite for a reason. The neutral zone bargain, there are rules. They have to ask. They have to be refused. They have to claim breach. Then they can come aboard." "How do you know that?" "Hruthic told me once. He read everything." "How long do we have?" "Until they get tired of being polite. Half an hour." "Less." The cord helpfully answered the question. "You have 12 of your minutes." "Less," Tamaz said. They moved. Outpost Thurian 9 was a maintenance way station, not a fortress, but 11 years of working on a thing teaches you the soft places in it, and the hard places in it, and the places where, if a man knew where to put his weight, he could shut the world out of a corridor for a useful number of minutes. Tamaz knew his station. He took Iyu's hand and he walked her quickly through the soft places. They went through the galley and through the maintenance crawl behind the galley and up the access ladder beside the secondary scrubber and into the small triangular room where the manual airlock overrides lived, the room that nobody on station except him and Mariama and Hruthic had ever bothered to learn the door code for. He punched the door code. He pushed Iyu inside. He pushed Addisa inside. He followed them in. He shut the door. He keyed the manual lockout. and the lockout chunked into place with the deep, satisfying chunk of a thing built in a yard on Earth a long time ago by men who had assumed it would one day need to keep something out. Adisa sat down on the deck and pulled Iu against her side. Tamaz stood at the small port and looked out. He could see, through the port, the long curve of the station's outer hull and beyond it the slow, indifferent stars, and he saw the Keth ship. It was beautiful in the way a wasp is beautiful. It was long and narrow and ribbed, and the ribs caught the starlight in a chitinous gleam, and along the underside of it there were articulated arms folded close to the body, the way a mantis folds its arms, and he understood, looking at it, that the Keth had not built a ship so much as they had grown one, and that the thing he was looking at was as much an organism as a vessel. Then beyond the Keth ship, there came a second ship. The second ship was not beautiful. The second ship was a slab. It was a great gray-plated slab the size of a small city, and it had not arrived politely from a long distance the way the Keth ship had. It had simply appeared, the way a thing appears when it has folded space rather than crossed it, and now it sat in the black with the Keth ship between it and the station, and along its broad, flat flank, a row of weapon ports were opening one after the other with the slow, methodical efficiency of a man buttoning down a sleeve. "Adisa," he said quietly, "Adisa, come look." She came and looked. "That is a Voran dreadhull," she said. "That is a Voran dreadhull." They followed the Keth in. Or the Keth followed them, either way. Either way. She let out a breath. The calm in the small triangular room. There was a calm in the small triangular room, because Hruthik had once cursed for 40 minutes about its absence, and had then, the next month, installed one, woke up. A different chord came out of it. This one was lower and slower and made of fewer voices, and it carried under it a faint chemical sweetness that Tamaz did not understand was being transmitted through the speaker, until he found himself thinking about Kut Hay. "Guardian creature," said the slow chord. "The Kheth have no right to her. We of the Vorund Third House offer you safe passage and her safe conveyance to proper court. Stand down the inferior claim." "Of course," Adisa said softly. "Of course," Tamaz said. They looked at each other. "They will fight over her," Adisa said. "They will fight over her with us in between." "Yes." "And then whoever wins will take her." "Yes." "And she does not want to go with either of them." He looked at Iu, who was sitting on the deck with her knees up under her chin, and her throat patches the black of a closed door. "No," he said. Adisa rubbed her face. "Tamaz," she said, "we are two grease-stained outpost techs on a maintenance way station. We have a length of inch-and-a-quarter pipe and a flashlight." "Yes." "Tell me you have an idea." "I have an idea." "Tell me it is a good one." "It is a stupid one." "Of course it is." He went to the panel under the comm. He pulled out the small recessed handle that opened the panel. He pulled the panel open. Beneath it lay a flat black square with 3 keys recessed into its face. The keys were physical, brass, old, scratched in a way that suggested they had been touched a number of times by people who had not had any use for them, and would never have any use for them, and had then been left alone for very long stretches between touches. Each key sat in its own keyhole. None of the keys turned without 2 of the other keys turning first. Adisa came and stood over his shoulder. "What is that?" "It is a beacon." "What kind of beacon?" He looked up at her. "It's a cradle beacon." She stared at him. "You are joking." "I am not joking. Every Earth-built outpost has one. They put them in 80 years ago after the thing they don't talk about. They're in every way station. They're in every freighter built in an Earth yard. They're in every embassy in the cluster. They've been there my whole life. I have walked past this panel for 11 years and not looked at it. I forgot it was here." "You forgot." Hruthik forgot, Mariama forgot. Everyone forgot. That was the point. The Earth fleet wanted them everywhere and forgotten so that on the day they were needed they would not have been disabled by the people they were guarding. She looked at the 3 brass keys. It needs 3 turns. It needs 3 turns. There are 2 of us. There are 2 of us. He looked at EU. EU looked back at him. EU, he said, sweetheart, I need to ask you something. She tapped twice. There is a thing in this wall. It is a thing my people built a long time ago for a reason that they don't talk about and don't forget. It is a way of asking my people to come help us. If we turn it on, my people will come. They will come quickly and they will come with everything they have. They will not be polite. Do you understand? 2 taps slow. It needs 3 of us to turn it. Adisa and I are 2. I am asking you to be the 3rd. She looked at the 3 brass keys. She looked at the comm. She looked at the small port that showed the wasp ship and the slab. She tapped twice. He showed her how to hold the key. He showed Adisa how to hold the key. He held the last key himself. Their hands did not shake. The keys had been built by men in a yard on Earth a long time ago to be turned by hands that were possibly shaking, and they had been engineered to be turned anyway. On 3, he said. On 3, Adisa said. EU did not say anything. She tapped twice. 1, he said. 2, Adisa said. 3, he said. They turned the keys. The keys turned. The panel did not light up. The comm did not chime. Nothing in the small triangular room did anything dramatic at all. Somewhere very deep in the floor, far down beneath the deck plates and beneath the secondary scrubber and beneath the manual airlock overrides and beneath the long-forgotten bones of the station, a small machine that had been waiting for 80 years woke up, and it made a single small clean noise like a coin dropping into water, and then it went back to sleep, having done its only job. The cord came back over the comm. Guardian creature, said the Keth voice, less polite now, your time is. The voice stopped. There was a pause on the comm. There was a different pause, in a different way, on the comm. There was the pause of a voice that has been interrupted by an instrument it does not understand. Tamaz could hear, faintly, the chitinous sound of Keth voices conferring rapidly behind the open channel. He could hear, faintly, the low chemical chord of a Vorund voice asking a question. The 2 chords overlapped briefly, and then both fell silent. When the Keth voice came back, it was different. It was, he thought, careful. Guardian creature, it said, you have transmitted a signal. Yes, he said. You understand the signal you have transmitted. Yes. A pause. You are 2 humans on an obsolete WAYSTATION. Yes. You are 2 humans on an obsolete WAYSTATION who have transmitted a cradle signal. Yes. A longer pause. The Vorund voice came in over the Keth voice. It was less careful, which was somehow worse. You have invoked the old compact. Yes. Over a child who is not yours. Yes. You understand the old compact does not require that the child be yours. Yes. You understand it requires only that the child be. Yes. The 2 chords went quiet again. They went quiet for longer this time. When they came back, they were not addressing Tamaz. The Keth said something to the Vorund. The Vorund said something to the Keth. The translator on the comm caught fragments. The fragments did not need translating. The fragments said, who fires first? The fragments said, not me. The fragments said, not us either. The fragments said, how long? The fragments said, minutes. The fragments said, less. Then both chords cut out. There was, for some number of seconds, only the small breathing of the station. EU looked up at Tamaz. What did you do? She said. It was the longest sentence she had given them in her broken human. She had been working on it. He sat down on the deck next to her. He did not know how to answer her. He thought about how to answer her for a long moment, and then he answered her badly, the way most things are answered when they are answered honestly. "A long time ago," he said, "my people did a bad thing." She listened. 80 years ago, he said, there was a war. There were a lot of wars, but this was a particular one. There was a child. The child was not ours. The child was caught between two armies that were not ours either. Both armies wanted the child for the same kind of reason these people out there want you. We were neutral. We were supposed to stay neutral. We did not stay neutral. He looked at the deck. "We sent our ships," he said. "We sent every ship we had. We did not ask anyone's permission. We came and we took the child and we put her in the middle of our fleet and we said, 'This child is now under our protection, and anyone who would like to discuss this with us may discuss it with us, and the first person to fire a shot will discover what we are willing to do.'" He did not say what they had done. He did not say what they had done because he did not have to. EU had been watching his face. Adisa had been watching his face. They could see what they could see. "We did not stop with the armies," he said quietly. "We did not stop until we were very sure that no one in the cluster would ever again think that a child was a thing that could be taken. We do not talk about what we did. We do not put it in our histories. The other species put it in theirs. They put it in theirs in very large letters." He breathed out. "After it was over," he said, "we built the beacons. We put them everywhere. We told the other species, if you ever again find yourselves arguing over a child in earshot of a human, the human gets to ask us to come, and we will come, and we will not be polite." "They are afraid of you," EU said. "Yes. Of all of you. Yes. Even the two of you." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "Even the two of us." She put her small fluted hand on the back of his wrist again. Her throat patches had lifted. They were not pale, they were not bright, but they were not black. The fleet did not announce itself. It came in the way a fleet comes when it has been called by a cradle signal, and not for a moment before. It did not fold space the way the Voron slab had folded space, which was an industrial sort of folding, a folding of the throat-clearing sort. It folded space the way a hand folds a letter, neatly, several times, and then put itself down in the only place there was room for it to be put down. There were a great many ships. Tamaz was not a military man. He could not have named them, except for the flagship at the center, which he recognized because his mother had pointed it out on a parade broadcast when he was 9 years old and had said, in the careful voice she had used for important things, that the ship was called the Marguerite, and that the Marguerite had been built in the yard at Baikonur, and that she carried the name of a child who had been taken from her mother in a war 80 years ago and not given back in time. The Marguerite had been her age, his mother had said. He had asked what had happened to her. His mother had not answered the question. She had answered instead a different one, which was, "That is why we built the ship." The Marguerite came in at the head of the fleet. It was old. That was the thing that struck him first, looking at it through the small port. It was old. It had been built before he was born, and it had not been retired, and it had not been refit beyond the necessary. It carried its scars. There were long scoured streaks down its flank where it had been hit by things that had not killed it. There were patches along its dorsal ridge where its plating had been replaced with plating that did not quite match. There were names painted on it. He could not read most of the names at the distance, but he could see that there were many of them, written in many hands, by people who had wanted, very badly, to be remembered by it. The fleet did not fire. It did not have to. It simply arranged itself in the manner of a fleet that has done this before, around the Keth ship and the Voron slab. It did not surround them. Surrounding them would have been theatrical. It interposed itself between them and the station, which was a different thing and a quieter one, and a much more frightening one. The Marguerite's voice came over the comm. It was a woman's voice. It was old. It was tired in the particular way of a person who has done the same job for a very long time and is not done doing it yet. "This is Captain Imani Rousseau of the Earth Cradle vessel Marguerite," she said. "I am responding to a cradle signal from Outpost Thurian 9. I am addressing the Keth Second Claw and the Voron Third House. The child you are disputing is now under the protection of the Earth Fleet. Stand down your weapons. Stand down your claims. You may file your grievances with the Cradle Court at your earliest convenience. You may not press them here." A pause. The Keth Court answered. "We." "Stand down your weapons," Captain Rousseau said. The Keth weapons stood down. The Voron Court did not answer. "Voron Third House," Captain Rousseau said. "I will not ask you twice." The Voron weapons stood down. Tamaz let out a breath that he had not known he was holding for the last quarter of an hour. Adisa let out the same breath. EU, who had been holding her own small silene version of that breath, let it out too, and her throat patches lifted to a soft, warm gold. "Outpost Thurian 9, Captain Rousseau said. "This is the Marguerite. Are you receiving?" Tamaz keyed the comm. "Marguerite," he said. "This is Thurian 9 receiving." "Identify." Tamaz Vey, Maintenance Lead. Adisa Okonkwo, Senior Tech. We are 2. +1. +1, EU Silene, a child. Acknowledged. Thurian 9, please remain in your secure position. We are coming aboard. Acknowledged. He turned off the comm. He sat down on the deck. He sat down beside EU. He found that his hands were shaking now, although they had not shaken when it mattered. Adisa sat down on the other side of EU and put an arm around her and let her own head rest briefly against the wall. "You forgot it was here," Adisa said. "I forgot it was here. 11 years. 11 years. She started to laugh. It was a small laugh and it had a crack in it. He found that he was laughing too. The laugh built between them, and EU watched them with her huge dark eyes and her throat patches flickering in something like puzzled wonder, and after a moment EU tried laughing too, which sounded, in Silene, like a small clear bell being struck 3 times very softly. They sat in the small triangular room and laughed at nothing at all until they could breathe again. The boarding party that came aboard was small. There were 6 of them. They were not in armor. That was the thing that struck Tamaz most. They were in working uniforms. They came aboard the way a repair crew comes aboard, with their tools clipped to their belts and their helmets under their arms. And the woman at the front of them had iron gray hair cut very short and very even, and her face was the face Tamaz's mother had described to him on the night she had told him about the Marguerite, although his mother had only ever seen her on a parade broadcast. Captain Imani Rousseau came down the corridor of Outpost Thurian 9 and stopped in front of Tamaz and put her hand out. "Mr. Vey," she said. "Captain, you did well." "I didn't do anything. I turned a key." "You turned a key. That was the thing to do. Most people in your position spend the better part of an hour not turning the key. You did not spend an hour." He didn't know what to say to that. She looked past him at Adisa and nodded and said, "Ms. Okonkwo." Adisa nodded back. Then Captain Rousseau crouched slowly, the way a person who has crouched in front of a great many frightened children crouches, knees set wide, hands resting open on her thighs, and she looked at EU. "Hello," she said. EU tapped twice against her chest. "My name is Imani," Captain Rousseau said. "I am here to make sure that no one takes you anywhere you do not want to go. Do you understand?" 2 taps. "There is going to be a long conversation about where you should live. You are not going to have to be in that conversation. The conversation is going to be between adults. While the conversation happens, you can stay with us. You can stay with us as long as you want. You can stay with us until you are grown and beyond. You will be safe with us. Do you understand?" 2 taps. "Or," Captain Rousseau said, "if you would rather, we will take you to your aunt. Your aunt is on a colony in the Silene Outer Reach. We know where she is. We can take you there ourselves. We will stay with you until she has you in her arms." EU looked at her for a long moment. She tapped twice slowly. Then she pointed at Tamaz. Then she pointed at Adisa. Then she made a small, careful gesture. She tapped twice against her own chest, and then she laid her two small fluted hands flat against her sternum, and then she opened them outward toward Tamaz and Adisa, and then she lifted them, palms up, the way a person lifts a thing that they would like to keep but cannot. "She is saying goodbye," Adisa said quietly. "She is saying thank you," Tamaz said. "She is saying both," Captain Rousseau said. EU went to her aunt. The Earth fleet took her there. They took her with the Marguerite at the front and 3 escort ships at the flank, because Captain Rousseau had said quietly to her bridge crew, in Tamaz's hearing, that she would prefer not to give the Keth or the Vorund any opportunity for second thoughts. The fleet went, and the Keth Wasp ship and the Vorund Slab went, in different directions, very carefully, the way 2 large animals leave a watering hole when they have remembered they had somewhere else to be. The neutral zone bargain was lifted. The phase shifted, everything came back. The station's crew rematerialized in their bunks and in their chairs, and in their corridors with no memory of having been gone, and Hruthick came into the galley still buttoning his jacket, complaining about his tea going cold, and stopped, because Tamaz was already crying when he came in, and Adisa was hugging Tamaz without quite knowing why, and the whole galley smelled of cardamom and warm bread and people, the smell of 40-odd people pretending they had slept well. "What's all this then?" Hruthick said, alarmed. "It's nothing," Tamaz said. "It's not nothing, you're crying." "It's nothing, eat your porridge." "My porridge is cold." "I'll make you fresh porridge." "You're crying and offering me porridge." "Yes." Hruthick looked at Adisa. Adisa shrugged at him with one shoulder. Hruthick, who had been a man on a great many stations with a great many friends and had learned, in that life, when to stop asking questions, sat down and let Tamaz make him fresh porridge. They did not tell him. They did not tell anybody. There was a moment that evening when Hruthick passed the small triangular room on his way to check the secondary scrubber, and Tamaz saw him pause and look at the door for a beat longer than the door deserved. The way a man looks at a door when something at the back of his mind is trying very hard to remember a thing it has been told to forget. Hruthick stood there for perhaps 3 seconds. Then he shook his head, the way a man shakes off a thought he has decided is not his to have, and went on down the corridor whistling the first bar of an Old Hills song from a country on a world he had not seen in 40 years. Tamaz watched him go. He thought, for the first time and not the last, about how many other Hruthicks across the cluster were, at that very moment, standing in front of doors they could not quite place, shaking their heads, walking on. He thought about how many of them had been guarded once somewhere, by some grease-stained tech with a length of pipe and a brass key. He thought about how the whole edifice of his species' terrifying reputation rested, ultimately, on small unwitnessed moments in small unwitnessed rooms, on people who would never know they had been saved, by people they would never know had saved them. He went and made himself another cup of tea. There was a quiet conversation later with a quiet man in a quiet office at the next port of call, in which Tamaz and Adisa signed a number of things and were thanked in carefully chosen words, and were given small cradle pins to wear on the inside of their collars, where nobody would see them unless Tamaz or Adisa wanted them seen. The pins were not medals. They were a different kind of thing. They were a quiet acknowledgement that the two of them had been counted, on a particular day, among the people the Earth fleet had been built for. The quiet man asked them, at the end of the conversation, whether they had any questions. Adisa said no. Tamaz said yes. He said, "Did we do the right thing?" The quiet man looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Vey," he said, "I have sat in this chair for 19 years. I have signed papers across this desk for 41 people who turned cradle keys. I have been asked that question by 38 of them. The other three did not ask because they already knew the answer. I do not give my own answer because my answer is not the one that matters. I ask you instead the question I ask all of you. Would you do it again? Tamaz did not have to think about it. Yes, he said. Then you did the right thing, the quiet man said. The doing of it and the willingness to do it again are the same act, separated by time. We do not ask any more of the keyholders than that. He stood. He shook their hands. He saw them out. He went back to his desk where, presumably, he waited for the next two people to come through the door and ask him the question he had been asked 38 times before. The cradle beacon under the panel in the small triangular room was replaced. A different one was installed. It looked exactly like the old one. 3 brass keys, scratched in the right places, set into a flat black square. Tamaz walked past it on his way to the secondary scrubber every shift for the next 16 years, and did not, after the first month, look at it. That was the point. He went home eventually. He went home to Lagos, to the tin-roofed house his mother had died in 3 years before, and he sat on the small concrete step that she had sat on when she had told him the story of the tortoise and the leopard, and he watched the evening come down over the city, and he listened to the long, stubborn pulse of a place where 11 million people were going about their evening. He thought about EU. He thought about the way EU's throat patches had lifted when he had given her the tea. He thought about the way the Marguerite had carried her scars. A year after that, a parcel arrived at the tin-roofed house. It was small, it was wrapped in brown paper, it had no return address. Inside was a small fluted ring of some metal he did not recognize. The ring had been sized for an adult human hand. Beside it lay a single sheet of paper, on which had been written, in a careful student Silene's careful hand, 2 lines. The first line said in human script, "I remember." The second line said in human script, "Thank you for the tea." Tamaz put the ring on. He wore it the rest of his life. He did not tell anybody what it was. He did not have to. Sometimes, at the kettle when he was making tea, he would catch the small fluted gleam of it on his finger, and he would think about a wet pad smelling of kelp, and a small alien child with her throat patches gone almost black, and a length of inch-and-a-quarter pipe set down quietly on a deck, and a kettle that had been still warm because someone had touched it 10 minutes before, and a fleet that had come the way a fleet comes when it has been called. And he would think sometimes, watching the steam rise from his own cup the way it had risen from hers, that the most terrifying thing his people had ever built was not a ship. That the most terrifying thing his people had ever built was a promise, made 80 years ago, by people who had been so angry and so ashamed that they had reached into the future and built a thing into the walls of every station and every freighter and every embassy in the cluster. A thing that no one would look at. A thing that everyone would forget. Until the day a small alien child was alone in a kelp pad on an empty station, and a grease-stained tech with a length of pipe in his hand would remember that the thing was there. That the most terrifying thing his people had ever built was the part of themselves they had refused ever after to be talked out of. That the Keth knew it, that the Vorund knew it, that every species in the cluster knew it. That now, somewhere out in the Silene outer reach, a small queen with a small fluted ring of her own knew it too. And that, sitting on the concrete step of his mother's tin-roofed house with his tea going cool in his hand, was enough. It had to be. It was.